The marketplace was loud with voices, the sound of traders calling out their goods, and people rushing from one corner to another. Bright colors of cloths and fruits filled the stalls, and the smell of spices mixed in the air. But in one small corner of the busy market, an alien child sat on the ground, her eyes wet with tears. In her tiny hands lay the pieces of her only toy, a small carved figure that once brought her comfort. It was broken, shattered into 3 sharp parts, the head cracked away from the body. She held the broken pieces close to her chest, as if hugging them could make them whole again. This toy was more than just wood and paint. It was her treasure, the only thing her late father had given her before he was taken away by war. Every night she had held it tightly, whispering stories to it as if it could listen. And now, after cruel hands of local bullies had snatched it away and stomped on it for amusement, it was gone. The girl sobbed quietly, afraid to cry too loud in case more people noticed her weakness. Many passed by. Traders looked, then turned their eyes away. A mother carrying fruit tugged her child away, not wanting to get involved. To them, it was nothing, just a toy. But to the small girl, it was her heart, broken in the dust. Then, from the moving crowd, a human stopped. He was taller than most around him, his clothes simple and worn from travel. His face carried lines of hardship, and his hands were calloused from work. He watched the girl for a moment, his gaze softening as he noticed her shaking shoulders and the shattered toy in her hands. Unlike others, he did not walk away. He stepped closer, bending down so his eyes met hers. The child looked up, her alien eyes wide and filled with distrust. Humans were not welcome here. They were seen as weak, outsiders who had no place in the city. She expected him to mock her, maybe even grab the toy and laugh like the bullies. But instead, he stretched out his hand, palm open, not to take but to offer. What happened? His voice was calm, deep, and kind. She sniffled, clutching the toy tighter. They broke it. It was mine, my only one. The human gently reached for the broken head of the toy lying in the dust near her foot. He turned it carefully in his rough fingers, studying the cracks as if it were something important. Then he looked at her again and smiled faintly. I can fix this. The girl's breath caught. No one had said such words before. Everyone else only told her to forget it, that toys didn't matter. But this man, this stranger, spoke as if it truly mattered, as if her tears were not foolish but real. Her small hands trembled as she held out the rest of the broken pieces. For a long second, she hesitated, her heart torn between fear and hope. Finally, she placed them in his palm. His large hand closed gently over the fragments, protecting them as if they were glass. The girl watched, her sobs slowing, her eyes now curious. Why would a human care for her pain? Why would anyone spend time fixing something so worthless? The human stood up, still holding the pieces safely. He looked around the marketplace, noticing the stares of others. Some shook their heads, some smirked, and a few whispered. But he did not care. He looked back at the girl and said softly, "Come with me. I'll show you." Her small legs trembled as she rose. She wiped her tears with the back of her hand and followed him. Each step felt heavy, yet something inside her pushed forward. She did not understand why she trusted him. Maybe it was his eyes, tired but honest. Maybe it was the way he handled her broken toy, as if it carried the weight of a world. The market noise faded behind them as they walked through narrow streets. The girl hugged her arms close to her chest, glancing at the toy pieces he held with such care. She thought of her father, of nights when he told her stories of faraway stars. Would he have trusted this human too? The sun dipped lower, painting the sky with gold and orange. The air turned cooler as they reached the edge of the city. The human finally stopped before a small building, plain and unremarkable. He pushed the door open and stepped inside, nodding for her to follow. The girl entered cautiously. Her eyes widened at the sight. Strange tools covered the tables, metal devices that glowed faintly, wires that hummed with quiet energy, and wooden boxes filled with parts she couldn't name. It was a workshop, though unlike anything she had ever seen. The air smelled of oil, smoke, and something sharp, like melted stone. The human set the toy pieces on a clean cloth on the table. He rolled up his sleeves and picked up a small glowing tool, its tip shining bright. The girl's heart thumped faster. She hugged herself tighter, standing in the corner, uncertain whether to trust him fully. But then he looked back at her and smiled again. "Don't worry, I won't break it further. I'll make it better." His words carried warmth, like a small fire in the cold. The girl's lips parted, but no words came out. For the first time in so long, her tears stopped. She sat quietly on a stool, her eyes locked on the human, watching his steady hands as he touched the broken toy. She still did not know his name. She still did not know why he cared. But deep inside, something stirred, something she had not felt since her father left. It was not just hope, it was the beginning of trust. And as the first sparks of light shone from his tool onto the toy's broken edges, the girl realized this human was not like the others. He was different, and maybe, just maybe, he could do what no one else ever had, bring her lost treasure back to life. The room was dim, lit only by the soft glow of strange lamps hanging from the walls. The girl's small hands clutched the edge of the stool as she looked around with wide eyes. This was not like any place she had ever entered before. Her people worked with stone, wood, and cloth, but the human's workshop was filled with things that clicked and shone. Metal arms reached from the walls, gears turned silently in open boxes, and faint sparks of blue light flickered on long tables crowded with tools. It was both frightening and fascinating. The human moved with ease inside this place, as if he belonged to every object and every sound. He laid the broken toy pieces carefully on a cloth, almost like a healer laying down the body of a patient. His rough hands picked up a long rod with a glowing tip, and when he touched it against a scrap of metal, it made a sharp hiss. The girl jumped in surprise. Her breath caught in her throat. He looked at her and chuckled softly, shaking his head. "Don't worry," he said in a calm voice. "It won't hurt. This is just how I fix things." The girl blinked, her heart racing, but she stayed. She could have run away, back into the crowded market, back to the loneliness that waited for her, but something inside told her to sit still. Her father had always said, "Watch with your eyes before you trust with your heart." And so, she watched. The human leaned closer to the toy, his brow furrowed in concentration. He didn't rush. Every move of his hand was slow, careful, as if he was afraid of making another crack. His eyes narrowed, following the broken lines in the wood, and he murmured words to himself, words she didn't understand. Yet, his tone was soft, almost like he was speaking kindly to the toy. The girl tilted her head. Why would he talk to a thing? Her people never did that. To them, objects were only objects. Yet, the way he worked made it seem like this toy was alive, like it deserved respect. She slid a little closer on the stool, her eyes never leaving his hands. Her mind filled with questions she was too afraid to ask. Why does he care? Why doesn't he throw it away? Why does he act like fixing my toy is the most important thing in the world? The human set the glowing rod down and picked up a tiny brush dipped in some thick, shiny liquid. He spread it gently along the cracks of the toy's body, filling the broken lines until they vanished into smoothness. Then he took out thin wires, twisting them so finely that they looked like strands of hair. He slid them into the toy's joints, giving them strength where the wood had split. The girl's mouth parted in awe. It looked like magic. The pieces that had seemed useless now fit together, becoming whole again. But still, she stayed quiet, afraid that even a single word might disturb his focus. For hours, the human worked. The light outside faded into the deep blue of night, but inside the workshop, the lamps glowed brighter, throwing shadows across the walls. The girl rested her chin on her hands, her small legs swinging off the stool, unable to take her eyes off him. At one point, her stomach growled softly. She pressed her hands against it, embarrassed, but the human heard. He set down his tool and walked to a shelf, pulling out a small round loaf of bread. He tore it in half and placed one piece in her hand. "Eat," he said simply. She hesitated. Sharing food was not common between her kind and his. Many said humans ate differently, strangely, even disgustingly. But when she looked into his eyes, she saw no trick, no cruelty, only kindness. Slowly, she took a bite. The bread was plain but warm, and it filled the cold emptiness inside her. "Better?" he asked. She nodded shyly, chewing slowly, her eyes never leaving the toy. The human smiled faintly and returned to his work. His hands were steady, but his face revealed something else, pain. There were old scars on his arms, faint lines of burns and cuts, marks of someone who had fought and lost many things. The girl noticed them now, her young mind wondering what stories lay hidden in those scars. At last, he paused, wiping sweat from his brow. He leaned back, studying the toy under the lamp's glow. The girl leaned forward eagerly, but he held up his hand. "Not yet," he said softly. "It still needs more." Her shoulders slumped, but she stayed patient. She had waited all day in sadness. She could wait a little more in hope. Then something unexpected happened. A group of voices passed outside the workshop, their words sharp and cruel. She recognized them, the same bullies who had broken her toy. They laughed loudly, their voices mocking. "Did you see the weakling cry?" one of them jeered. "All for a broken stick." The girl's chest tightened. Her hands curled into fists, but she said nothing. The human looked at her quietly, then at the door. His jaw tightened, but he didn't move to chase them. Instead, he turned back to her and said, "Ignore them. They break what they cannot build. That is their weakness, not yours." The girl blinked at him, startled. No one had ever said such words to her. People always told her to be strong, to fight back, or to stay silent. But this man told her something different, something that felt deeper, truer. She felt her throat tighten, and before she knew it, her lips moved. "Why are you doing this? Why help me?" The human looked at her for a long moment. His eyes softened, carrying sadness she couldn't fully understand. Then he said quietly, "Because someone once fixed something for me when I had nothing. That kindness saved me. Now I pass it on." The girl stared at him, her small heart beating faster. His words settled inside her like a seed, something that might grow one day. He turned back to the toy, his hands moving again with purpose. She sat in silence, no longer scared, no longer unsure. For the first time in a long while, she felt safe. She didn't know why, but she knew she wanted to stay, to watch, to see the moment when her treasure became whole again. The workshop filled with the gentle sound of tools, the hum of machines, and the steady breath of a human who worked not for gold, not for power, but simply because he cared. And in the quiet corner of that strange room, an alien child's broken world slowly began to heal. The girl sat quietly, her eyes fixed on the man's hands as he continued to work on the toy. The workshop was filled with soft sounds, the scratch of tools, the faint hum of machines, and the steady rhythm of his breathing. The toy was slowly changing, piece by piece. But what surprised her more was how calm she felt sitting there. She had never trusted anyone outside her own kind, yet here she was, alone in a human's room, watching him as if he were the only safe place in the world. The man glanced at her and smiled. His smile was small, tired, but real. "Do you know," he said softly, "back on my world, children also hold toys like these when they're sad. Sometimes it's not just a plaything. It becomes their friend." The girl tilted her head, unsure. "Even humans?" she asked in a low voice. "Yes," he nodded. "Especially humans. I had one when I was small, a little wooden horse. Its leg broke one day, and I cried for hours. My mother fixed it for me. When she handed it back, it felt as if she had given me hope again." The girl hugged her knees to her chest. His words stirred something inside her. She thought of her father, who had carved her toy and told her stories about bravery and love. She thought of the nights she whispered secrets to the toy, believing it could listen. Maybe humans were not so different after all. Maybe they understood loss and loneliness the same way. The man carefully joined two broken pieces together, his fingers steady. The cracks vanished slowly under his touch, leaving a smooth line. The girl's eyes widened in wonder. "You're making it stronger," she whispered. He nodded again, his expression gentle. "That's what we do. When something breaks, we try to make it stronger than before." She stared at him, her young mind turning over the words. Was he talking about the toy or about her heart? Outside the workshop, the night was silent. The voices of the bullies had faded long ago, leaving only the distant wind that brushed against the walls. Inside, the girl felt something strange building between them. It was quiet, invisible, but strong. It wasn't just about the toy anymore. She was starting to feel that he cared about her sadness, about her life, in a way no one else ever had. The man set down his tool and leaned back, stretching his sore arms. He rubbed his shoulders, wincing slightly. The girl noticed the scars again, the faded lines running across his skin. Her curiosity grew too strong to hold back. "What happened to you?" she asked softly, pointing at the marks. He looked at his arms, then at her. For a long moment, he was silent. Then he said, "Fights, accidents, times when I protected others and paid the price. These scars remind me I survived, even when things felt impossible. The girl blinked. She had always thought scars were ugly, proof of weakness. But when he spoke, they sounded like proof of strength, proof that he had suffered and still stood tall. She whispered, "You're not afraid?" His eyes met hers, steady and calm. Of pain? Yes, sometimes. Of losing what I love? Always. But fear does not stop me from trying again. Her chest felt tight, her small hands squeezing her knees. She had been afraid every day since her father was taken. Afraid of being alone, afraid of being weak, afraid of being forgotten. Yet this man spoke as if fear was not the end, but only a shadow. The girl lowered her head, her voice almost a whisper. I was afraid they would laugh at me forever, because I cried for a toy. He shook his head. They laugh because they don't understand, but I understand, and that's enough. The words sank into her heart, heavy and warm at the same time. She looked at the half-repaired toy lying on the table. For the first time, she wasn't just waiting for it to be fixed. She was learning something else, something about herself. The man began working again, this time humming softly under his breath. The sound was strange but comforting, like a lullaby sung in another language. The girl's eyes grew heavy, her body tired after the long day of tears and fear. She tried to stay awake, tried to keep watching, but her head slowly drooped. When she woke, the lamp was still glowing, though dimmer now. The man sat nearby, resting with his back against the wall. The toy lay between them on the table, not yet complete but far closer to being whole. She rubbed her eyes, embarrassed that she had fallen asleep. He noticed her and smiled faintly. "Rest is good," he said softly. "Tomorrow will need your strength." The girl frowned. "Tomorrow?" "Yes," he replied. "You'll need courage to carry it again. But don't worry, I'll be here." Her lips parted in surprise. Nobody had ever promised to stand beside her before. People came and went, but never stayed. Yet here he was, saying he would be there tomorrow, as if her small life mattered enough for him to care. Her throat felt tight again, but this time not from sadness. She hugged her arms around herself and whispered, "Thank you." The man only nodded, his eyes soft. "You don't have to thank me. Fixing what is broken, that's what I do." The girl looked at him for a long time, her mind full of thoughts too big for her young age. He was fixing the toy, yes, but more than that, he was fixing the cracks inside her heart. She didn't know why, but she felt that this night would stay with her forever. The bond between them was silent. No promises were spoken, no oaths made. It was just a small alien child and a human, sitting together in a quiet room, bound not by blood or duty, but by kindness. And as the toy grew whole again, so did the fragile trust that had begun to bloom between them. The morning light slipped through the cracks of the workshop window, filling the room with a soft golden glow. Dust floated gently in the air, and the smell of metal and oil mixed with the freshness of dawn. The girl rubbed her sleepy eyes, her small body still curled on the stool where she had rested the night before. For a moment, she thought it had all been a dream. The human, the workshop, the promise to fix her toy. But then her gaze fell on the table, and her breath caught in her chest. The toy was no longer broken. She slid off the stool, her bare feet padding softly against the wooden floor as she moved closer. The toy stood whole again, its cracks sealed, its shape strong and unshaken. But it was not just repaired. The human had polished its surface until it gleamed. He had carved tiny patterns into the wood, giving it new life, and painted its edges with faint colors that shimmered in the morning light. The small figure looked stronger, more beautiful, almost magical. Her trembling hands reached out but stopped just before touching it. She was afraid. Afraid it might break again. Afraid this miracle might vanish like a dream if her fingers pressed too hard. She glanced at the human, who stood quietly nearby, watching her with a faint smile. "It's yours," he said gently. "Go on. Take it." She swallowed hard, then lifted it with careful fingers. The moment her skin touched its surface, warmth spread through her chest. The toy felt alive, as if carrying not only the memory of her father, but also the hands of the human who had given it new strength. Her small arms wrapped around it tightly, holding it close to her heart. Tears filled her eyes again, but this time they were not of sadness. "You fixed it," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You made it better." The human's tired face softened. "Yes, and it will last now, strong enough for you to keep." She clutched the toy harder, her tears dripping onto its polished surface. Then, without thinking, she whispered, "You're my hero." The words slipped out like a secret, something she hadn't meant to say aloud. Her cheeks burned, and she quickly looked down, embarrassed. But the man didn't laugh. He didn't mock her as others would have. Instead, he lowered himself to her level, his eyes steady and kind. "I'm no hero," he said softly. "I just wanted to see you smile again." Her chest tightened, her little heart pounding. No one had ever said such things to her. No one had cared for her joy before. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that his words were true. And as she held the toy, she felt that maybe they were. But outside the workshop, the world was not as kind. Unseen by them, in the shadows of the alley, eyes watched. A pair of tall figures stood, their arms crossed, their faces twisted with scorn. They had heard the whispers in the market about a human fixing an alien child's toy. To them, it was shameful. Humans were meant to stay low, to serve, not to build bonds that challenged the rules of their society. One of the figures sneered. "Pathetic. Look at her, trusting him." The other nodded coldly. "If others see this, they might start believing humans can be more than slaves. We cannot allow that." Their voices faded as they moved away, but the danger they carried was real. Neither the child nor the human knew yet that their small act of kindness had already become a threat in the eyes of powerful people. Inside the workshop, the girl finally lifted her head, her face glowing with joy. She spun the toy gently in her hands, admiring every new detail. Her laughter rang softly in the quiet room, a sound so pure that the human felt his heart lighten. For a moment, the scars of his past, the weight of his loneliness, seemed less heavy. "You should take it home now," he said, standing slowly. "Keep it safe. Don't let anyone take it from you again." Her smile faltered slightly. "Will you still be here?" "Yes," he replied. "If it breaks again, or if anything else breaks, bring it to me. I'll help." Her chest filled with warmth. She nodded eagerly, holding the toy close. She wanted to stay, to never leave this safe place, but she knew she had to return. Still, she promised herself she would come back. As the girl stepped out into the morning light, her small figure looked brighter, stronger, no longer weighed down by sadness. The toy was not just wood anymore. It was proof that someone cared, proof that not all were cruel. She walked with new courage, unaware of the storm beginning to gather around her. The human stood at the doorway, watching her go. For a moment, he allowed himself a rare feeling, hope. He didn't know what the future would bring. But he knew this child had reminded him of something he had nearly forgotten. That even in a broken world, kindness could still be stronger than cruelty. But shadows lurked beyond the sunlight. Whispers spread quickly in the city, twisting into threats. What had started as a simple act of repair was no longer simple. It had drawn attention, unwanted, dangerous attention. The girl hugged her toy as she walked through the market streets, not noticing the suspicious glances cast her way. She only felt lighter, braver, because now she carried more than a toy. She carried a bond with a human who had shown her that broken things could be made whole again. And though neither of them could see it yet, that bond would soon be tested in ways they could not imagine. The girl walked through the busy streets, clutching her toy tightly against her chest. Her face glowed with a smile she hadn't worn in many days. People in the market noticed the joy in her step, but most turned away, pretending not to see. Some, however, whispered to one another, pointing at the toy and shaking their heads. Rumors had already spread, rumors about the human who had rebuilt what was broken. To some, it was a small story of kindness. To others, it was dangerous. At first, the girl didn't notice the eyes following her. She was too busy admiring her toy, turning it in her hands, whispering little stories to it like she used to when her father was alive. But as she walked deeper into the market, the noise of voices changed. Laughter echoed harshly from a nearby corner. A group of older children, the same bullies who had destroyed her toy before, stepped out to block her path. Well, one of them sneered, his eyes narrowing. "Look who's smiling again? Did you steal another piece of junk?" The girl shook her head quickly, hiding the toy behind her back. "No, it's mine." Another boy stepped closer, his voice mocking. "That's the same toy we broke? How is it back together? Did your human pet fix it for you?" Her stomach turned cold at his words. She wanted to run, but her legs felt heavy. She gripped the toy tighter, refusing to hand it over. The tallest of the bullies leaned in, his voice sharp. You don't belong here with us, and that human doesn't belong here at all. Maybe we should teach you both a lesson. Before they could act, a hand clamped down on the tall boy's shoulder. He froze, his smirk fading when he turned and saw the human standing there. His shadow fell across them, his face calm but his eyes firm. That's enough, the human said, his voice steady. The bullies tried to laugh, but there was no strength in it. One of them spat on the ground. Stay out of this, human. She's one of us, not one of you. She's a child, the man replied quietly, and she deserves peace, not cruelty. For a moment, no one moved. The bullies exchanged uncertain glances, their bravado shaken. They muttered insults under their breath, but slowly stepped back. This isn't over, one of them hissed before disappearing into the crowd. The girl's knees trembled. She looked up at the man, her eyes wet with fear, but he placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. You're safe, he said. Don't let their words break you. She nodded weakly, though her chest still hurt. The toy pressed against her heart like a shield. She realized then that the toy was no longer just hers. It was also a link to him, a promise that she wasn't alone anymore. But trouble was not only in the streets. In the upper halls of the city, word had reached the officials. They gathered in a stone chamber, their faces grim. One of them slammed his fist against the table. A human repairing our children's toys? What will come next? Building trust? Building respect? It is dangerous. Another official leaned forward, his eyes cold. If the people begin to see humans as equals, we lose control. This act cannot be ignored. We must make an example. They sent guards into the lower quarters, searching for the human. The air grew tense as whispers spread, guards asking questions, footsteps echoing down narrow streets, doors being shut quickly in fear. The girl overheard some traders murmuring about it. Her heart pounded in her chest. She ran back to the workshop, her small feet barely keeping balance on the cobblestones. When she burst through the door, she found the man sitting quietly, carving something into a piece of wood. His calm eyes lifted to hers as she gasped for breath. They're looking for you, she cried. The guards, they want to punish you. The man didn't look surprised. He set down the carving tool and sighed. I thought they might. Her eyes widened in disbelief. Then why did you help me? Why risk this? He smiled faintly, though sadness shadowed his face. Because kindness is worth the risk. If they punish me for fixing hope, then so be it. The girl shook her head fiercely, tears welling in her eyes. No, you can't let them take you. You're my hero. The words spilled out again, louder this time, trembling with fear. The man's heart ached as he looked at her. He reached out, brushing her hair gently back from her face. Heroes are not always safe, he said softly. But sometimes they must stand even when it costs them. Outside, heavy boots thundered closer. The sound of metal armor clinked as guards marched down the street. The girl clutched her toy tightly, her body shaking. She wanted to hide him, to protect him, but she was too small, too powerless. The man stood, his tall frame casting a shadow across the room. He picked up a simple tool from the table, not a weapon, but something he could hold in his hand. He turned to her with calm eyes. Stay behind me, he said. No matter what happens, remember this. You are stronger than you believe. Don't let anyone take that from you. The girl's lips trembled. She pressed the toy to her heart and nodded. Then the door rattled under the force of fists pounding against it. The guards' voices roared, demanding the human step out. The man inhaled deeply, his eyes steady. He knew this moment was coming, but he also knew something else, that a simple act of kindness could not be erased by fear. The child had found hope again, and hope was more powerful than chains. The girl watched with wide eyes as he opened the door, the morning light spilling in along with the shadows of armored men. Her heart pounded with terror and pride all at once. She didn't know what would happen next, but she knew one thing for certain. No matter what they did to him, he would remain her hero forever. The heavy fists on the door shook the workshop again. Dust fell from the ceiling, and the girl pressed herself tighter into the corner, clutching her toy like it was her heartbeat. The human stood still, his back straight, his hands calm even as the pounding grew louder. The guards outside shouted, their words filled with authority and anger. Open this door! Step out, human! You have broken the law! The girl's body shook, but the man only looked back at her once. His eyes were steady, his voice calm. Remember what I told you. Stay behind me. He pulled the door open with one strong motion. Sunlight spilled inside, blinding for a second, but then the figures appeared. 3 guards in dark armor, their faces hidden behind masks. Their spears gleamed, their boots thudded against the ground as they stepped inside. The leader pointed at him sharply. You dare meddle with our people's children? You dare build trust where none should exist? You will be punished. The human did not flinch. He stood tall, his hands empty except for the small carving tool he had been holding when they arrived. His voice was low but clear. I fixed what was broken. That is not a crime. The guards laughed bitterly. One of them sneered. It is when you are human, you forget your place. The girl's chest burned with anger, but fear kept her silent. She wanted to scream at them, to tell them he was no criminal, but her voice trembled too much. She clung to the toy tighter, her eyes shining with tears. The guards moved closer, raising their spears. The leader's voice thundered. You will come with us. Resist, and you will be crushed. The man stepped forward slowly, putting himself between them and the girl. His eyes burned with quiet fire. If kindness is a crime, then I am guilty, but I will not let you take her hope away. The guards exchanged confused glances, then laughed cruelly. Hope? She is just a child. She is more than that, the human replied, his voice strong now. She is proof that even broken things can be made whole again. And if you strike me down, remember this. Others are watching. They will see that you fear the smallest act of care. Outside, footsteps had gathered. The market crowd had followed the guards, curious to see what would happen. Men, women, and children filled the street, whispering to each other, their eyes fixed on the workshop. The guards noticed the crowd and stiffened, but their leader raised his spear higher. You speak too boldly for a human. We will silence you. Before he could strike, a voice from the crowd called out. Why punish him? He fixed a child's toy. That is no crime. Another voice followed. He helped when no one else would. Would you punish mercy? The guards turned sharply, anger flashing in their eyes. But the whispers in the crowd grew stronger, rising like a tide. The people remembered the girl's cries, how everyone had walked away, and how only the human had stopped to care. Now, seeing him stand so fearlessly, something stirred in their hearts. The girl felt it too. Her fear melted into courage. She stepped out from behind the man, clutching her toy high in the air. Her voice trembled, but it rang clear. He is my hero. He gave me back my father's gift. He gave me back my smile. If you take him, you take my hope away. The crowd gasped. The guards froze, their spears still raised, but their hands uncertain. The girl's words cut through the air sharper than any blade. She was just a child, yet in that moment, her voice carried the weight of truth. The human turned his head slightly, his eyes soft with pride. Brave girl, he whispered. The guards tried to recover, their leader barking, Do not be fooled. He is dangerous. If we let humans act like this, soon they will demand more. Order must be kept. But the crowd was no longer silent. Murmurs grew louder, faces turned hard with defiance. One elder stepped forward, her wrinkled hands trembling, but her voice firm. Order is not built on cruelty. If a human can show kindness when we did not, what does that say about us? The words hit like a stone thrown into still water, sending ripples through the crowd. The guards shifted uneasily. Their power came from fear, but now fear was slipping away. The human stood taller, his presence calm, unshaken, even as 3 armed men faced him. He raised his voice, speaking not just to the guards, but to everyone watching. You call me weak because I am human. Yet strength is not in chains or weapons. Strength is in choosing to build, not to destroy. If fixing a child's toy frightens you so much, then perhaps you are weaker than me. Silence fell. Even the guards hesitated. The leader's hand trembled slightly on his spear. Around them, the crowd grew bolder, their whispers now voices, their voices now shouts. Leave him, someone cried. He did nothing wrong, shouted another. The noise swelled, a wave of voices pressing against the guards. The girl's heart pounded as she stood beside the human, holding his hand with one of hers and her toy with the other. She felt no fear now. She felt only pride. The guards stepped back, their eyes darting nervously at the crowd. Their leader hissed under his breath, his anger burning, but he could see the truth. To drag the human away now would spark a riot, and even their spears could not stop an entire city if it rose against them. With a sharp gesture, he ordered the others to lower their weapons. His voice was cold, dripping with hate. "This is not the end, human. You will regret this." The man only met his gaze calmly. "Perhaps, but not today." The guards turned sharply and marched away, their armor clinking as the crowd jeered behind them. Relief swept through the street like a breath of fresh air. People looked at the human not with scorn, but with respect. The girl squeezed his hand, her eyes shining with tears of triumph. "You didn't let them take you." He smiled faintly, though his voice was soft. "It wasn't just me. It was you. Your courage gave me strength." She held her toy close, her heart bursting with pride. For the first time, she felt that the world was changing, even if only a little. And in that moment, she knew the human wasn't just her hero. He was becoming a hero to many. The crowd slowly began to scatter after the guards left, their footsteps echoing through the narrow streets. The tension in the air softened, but whispers still lingered. People kept glancing back at the human as they walked away, some with cautious eyes, others with a quiet respect. The girl stayed close to him, her small hand wrapped around his fingers, her toy pressed firmly against her chest. Her heart was still racing, but for the first time, it was not from fear. It was from pride. Inside the workshop, silence returned. The human sat heavily on his chair, his shoulders sinking with exhaustion. He had stood tall before the guards and the crowd, but now, when only the girl could see, the weight showed in his eyes. His hands trembled slightly as he set his tool down. The girl noticed and frowned. "Are you hurt?" He shook his head slowly. "Not in body, just tired. Words can be heavier than weapons." She climbed onto the stool beside him, swinging her legs as she looked at his weary face. "But you were strong," she said softly. "You stood for me when no one else did. They all saw it. They know now." He turned to her, his tired eyes softening. "Strength does not always mean fighting. Sometimes it means refusing to bow, even when you are afraid." Her small fingers traced the patterns carved into her toy. The wood was smooth, glowing faintly in the lamplight. She thought of how it had once been shattered, worthless in the dirt, and how now it was whole again. She looked up at him with wonder. "You didn't just fix it, you gave it life again." He smiled faintly, though sadness lingered in his expression. "I only reminded it what it already was. Sometimes we all need someone to remind us." The girl grew quiet, her mind full of thoughts far larger than her age. She hugged the toy tighter and whispered, "When I look at this, I'll always remember you." The man leaned back in his chair, watching her with a faraway look. "One day," he said softly, "you will not need to remember me. You will be strong enough to stand alone. That is what matters." Her heart tightened at his words. She didn't want to imagine standing without him. In her eyes, he was more than just a man who fixed toys. He was her shield, her comfort, her proof that kindness could exist even in a world that often felt cruel. Days passed, but the story of what had happened spread quickly through the city. At first, it was only whispers about a human who had dared to face guards without fear. Then it grew into tales of defiance, courage, and compassion. The people began to speak differently about humans. Some still sneered, but others began to wonder, if one human could stand so bravely, could others be more than weak servants? The girl saw the change with her own eyes. When she walked through the market holding her toy, people no longer turned away as quickly. Some even nodded at her, their expressions softer. Once, a woman placed a small piece of fruit in her hand and whispered, "Your friend is brave." Each time she returned to the workshop, she found others waiting outside, men and women holding broken items, small tools, even toys. At first, they came shyly, afraid to be seen asking a human for help. But the man never refused. He fixed what they brought, patiently, gently, as if every cracked piece mattered. The girl sat nearby each time, watching. She saw how the people's eyes changed when they left, lighter, thankful, sometimes even smiling. Slowly, the workshop stopped being just a small, hidden place. It became something more, a place where broken things were not thrown away but given a second chance. One evening, as the sun dipped low, the girl asked, "Why do you do this for everyone? You could leave, hide, be safe. Why stay?" The man looked at her, his scarred hands resting on the table. His voice was calm. "Because once someone fixed me, not with tools, but with kindness. They saw worth in me when I felt worthless. I cannot repay them, but I can pass it forward." She thought about his words long into the night. It was then she realized the truth. He was not just her hero. He was trying to be a hero for anyone who needed one, but danger had not vanished. The guards had been shamed, but their anger still burned. From the shadows, they plotted, waiting for the right moment to strike again. Yet even they could not stop the whispers that grew stronger every day. Whispers of a human who rebuilt not only toys, but spirits. Whispers of hope. One night, as the lamps flickered in the workshop, the girl placed her toy gently on the table between them. Her eyes were determined, though her voice was small. When I am older, I want to do what you do. I want to fix what others break. I want to give people hope too. The man looked at her in silence, his chest heavy with emotion. Then, slowly, he reached out and placed his hand over hers. Then you will be greater than me, he said quietly, because the future belongs to you. Tears welled in her eyes, but they were warm tears, filled with courage instead of fear. She hugged him tightly, her small arms unable to reach all the way around his shoulders, but the hug carried all the strength of her heart. In the years that followed, the story of the human and the girl spread far beyond the market. Songs were whispered, then sung, about the day a human stood unafraid and a child's voice silenced armored men. To many, he was a hero. To others, a threat. But to one little girl, he was simply the man who had cared enough to fix her only treasure. And every night, as she held the toy close to her chest, she whispered the same words into the quiet darkness. He rebuilt more than my toy. He rebuilt me.